Hey guys, 𝗣𝗥𝗢𝗔𝗚 here, and I'm back with the third installment of my weight plate tab fix video for Bowflex SelectTech dumbbells. You might recall, a couple years ago, I made a video about how these tabs break and a couple ways to fix them. And back then I thought I had a really great solution for it, and some people have used it with great success. But a lot of people were having trouble finding a key part of the fix that I had mentioned, and that is this weld nut. And these, you can buy them usually in packages, but it's kind of hard to find them in individually. So people had trouble finding these, and that made the fix not as accessible to some people, or they'd have to go spend more money on buying stuff in bulk packages, and they might not need them all. So I want to show another method in this video. I should have shown it a couple years ago. I didn't, but I'll show it now. And hopefully it is a little bit more convenient and accessible for you guys. And I think you'll like the result better than my other fix. So first, what are we talking about here? If you haven't seen my previous videos, I'll put links so you can go watch them. But we're talking about how these tabs break on these plates. They're just kind of a cheap cast zinc or something tab. And they crack here. And this piece will usually come off, and you'll end up with pieces like that, where this used to go. Now, when that happens, of course, this tab no longer can hold onto the lip of the disc, right? So the way this works is that is how these plates are held into your dumbbell handle. So in order to use them safely, you need to fix the tab, and you need a fix that's relatively inexpensive, but it's also very durable. A couple of years ago, I introduced this method. I used a bolt and a weld nut, just like this one. And it's a great solution. I still like it as an overall solution. It works, it's doable, and if you go back and look at that video, you can absolutely use this method if you want to, if you can get your hands on these weld nuts. But I made refinements, and I'll show you what I think is an even better result. This almost looks like it's a factory tab. And what I've done is I've modified the bolt to round the edges, make it a little bit more smooth. And it's loose in here because I haven't epoxied it into place yet for this video. And then I used an epoxy with pigment to make a filler for this portion of the plate, so that you basically, it looks pretty much like a factory plate. The finish is really nice, and I think that even if your tabs aren't broken yet, this is a really nice mod to do to permanently fix all your tabs. This is not going to break. This is a grade 8 bolt. You're not going to have problems with this bolt. You'll destroy the rest of the dumbbell before you'll break this tab off. So let's talk about how I did this. You're going to need a few things. Drill and some bits. The bits will have to be appropriate for the bolt size that you're using. In this case, I'm using, I believe, a 5/16 bolt. So you'll need about a little bit over 1/4 of an inch bit to drill the hole for this. And I also used a larger bit to chamfer the edges, which you don't have to do, but I did it because it looks cleaner. And then you're going to need tape. You've seen me use this in many of my videos. I love blue painter's tape. It doesn't leave a residue, so it's perfect for the job. You're going to want some gloves for working with the epoxy, and some eye protection for your drilling. Sandpaper and file. Primarily, you can use, this is, I think, this is a 0 file, but 0, 2, they'll work. And then I use something like I think this is 600 grit paper for modifying the bolt, and I'll talk about that after. And then epoxy, you've seen me use this in other videos. I use a 5-minute cure 2-part epoxy from 𝗣𝗥𝗢𝗙𝗢, but there are many out there. You can use a longer cure one if you want. And to color it, to make it that black coloring, just like in the last video, I use black iron oxide powder. It's perfect pigment. It's cheap too. It's about $10 for this massive bag of it. You won't need that much. I do other projects, so you know it comes in handy, but it's cheap enough that I keep it on hand as a black pigment. You'll need some sort of stick and something to mix your epoxy. Just use something that you can throw away. The filler or pigment is optional. That's why I've got a star here. And then the hammer and punch and chisel, that all depends on your situation. If you've got rivets that you need to remove, you know, being able to use a chisel to remove that rivet can come in really handy. Or, you know, you're going to ruin your screwdriver if you're doing it, but you could use a screwdriver in a pinch to pop these rivets. So that's it as far as the list. And then the one important dimension to understand here is that from here to here is approximately 18 millimeters. So when you put your bolt in, you want the bottom of your bolt to be 17 to 18 millimeters. If it's 17, it's going to be a little bit loose. The plate will be a little bit loose in the handle. If it's 18, it's going to be just about right. And it turns out, and I talked about this in the previous video a couple years ago, that when you use a bolt of this size, through the original hole, so this hole here, if you use that hole as your hole for drilling, such that you get, you know, that's your center, you get the larger hole in that position. When you put your bolt, your 5/16 or 3/8 inch bolt into that hole, as it turns out, this from here to here will be just about right. It'll fall in the 17 to 18 millimeter range, which is what you want. So this hole is perfect as the guide hole for drilling your bigger hole. Now, how do you do this? The first thing you're going to do is take off the original pieces if they're not broken off already. And again, you can do that with, you know, chisel and hammer. Take off the pieces. You're going to be left with something that looks a bit like this. And I would recommend taking this rivet off. You don't have to, but I would take it off. But you're going to be left with something like this, where this is the steel now of the plate itself. And then you can see the lip to the plastic covering. This plastic covering is a lip. And it forms a pocket that you can pour your epoxy into. Okay, so now that you've got your pieces off, you're going to drill your hole through that original rivet hole, okay, in the correct size so that your bolt can slide. You don't want to have to tap it and screw it in. You want the bolt to slide freely into the hole. Once you've got your hole drilled, the next thing is to grab your tape and roll up a tube that will fit in the hole that you drilled. That will keep the epoxy from going down into the hole when you pour it into here. So basically it'll look like that. Then you're going to, we'll use this plate since it's got the steel still showing. You're going to put your tape alongside the pocket so that you don't affect the surrounding plastic, okay? you're basically looking to keep epoxy, keep sandpaper off of the plastic that surrounds the pocket. So basically like that. Then grab 2 more pieces, and on the back side of the plate you're going to cover the holes that are on the back side. Now you're going to mix up your epoxy, and if you're going to color it with any kind of pigment, you're going to add your pigment filler to your epoxy and you're going to pour it into this little pocket that you've created there and let it begin to set up. Now, because this is 5-minute epoxy, in about 10 minutes or so, the epoxy will be nice and tacky to the touch. You'll be able to, it'll feel a little bit sticky when you touch it. And that's perfect, because what you're going to do is after you've poured it and it's sitting in there like this, you're going to use your fingers and just kind of push on it to get it so that it takes the shine off of the epoxy, because the epoxy, when you pour it, it's really shiny. By taking off some of the shine of the epoxy, it makes it better match the surrounding plastic. And the other thing you're going to notice is that when you pour the epoxy in here, it's going to flow through and fill the hole where that other rivet used to go, which is great. It fills it in beautifully and it looks factory. So after your epoxy has cured, you can take your tape out. Now, this tape's not going to necessarily come out this easily. It's going to be a little bit stuck to the epoxy. So you're going to have to pull this out and then clean up the hole in here. If there's any, tape residue in there, you might have to run a drill through it again to clean out any epoxy that might have made it past the tape. But you're basically going to clean up that hole. Then, if you want, you can sand. And you can do it by hand. You don't need to use a power sander or anything like that. But you can basically sand this area to again, try to take some of the shine off of the epoxy. The end result, after you pull off your tape, after 24 hours, it's all cured. Pull off your tape, and this is what you'll be left with. So then you want to clean up anything, if there's any excess anywhere, take a look. It should look pretty good like that. You can fill this later if you want. I didn't. I like the look of it with the chamfer and everything. It's up to you. Now, move on to the next part, the bolt. Here's the original bolt. Here is the modified bolt. Now, why did I do this? One, it looks really nice. I mean, I love taking the lettering off and rounding the edges of this bolt, and it just comes out really, really nice. The other reason is these little sharp edges here, if you leave them, when this disc is riding on that bolt, you can see that the sharp edges are constantly riding. Every time you adjust your weights, it's doing that. By rounding the edges, you now have no sharp edges that are cutting into or in any way coming into contact with the lip of your discs. And it's the same for my discs, same principle applies. So it's just a nicer result. Okay, now how do I do this? You take your bolt before you even bother cutting it to length, okay, because you're going to cut it to length after to match the width of your plate. So before you do that, grab some tape, put it around the threads to protect your threads. Grab a drill, put this in the drill, and using your file and your sandpaper, two things. To take off the lettering, to make this smooth, just use this right up against there like that. So as this is going around at full speed, you're going to have this file up against that face. And it's just going to file those letters off until you get a nice smooth result. Same thing for these edges. You're going to put this on here like that, but you're going to do it at full speed, of course. And you're going to file off the edges until you get that rounded result. Then, if you want to take off some of the marks from the file, you can do the same thing with your sandpaper here and your sandpaper there. And when you're done, you'll have that. Then you're going to cut this to length. How long? You want to go as long as this is thick. As long as it doesn't protrude past this thickness. So that's okay. Once it's cut to length, the last step is to epoxy it into position here. Now, yes, you could thread it if you want and make it a removable thing, and then you could use thread lock on it. That's up to you. But like I said, the chances of you damaging this bolt, you'll ruin the dumbbells before you'll ruin this bolt. So you can epoxy this and just be done with it. So you mix up your 2-part epoxy again, apply it to the threads and in the hole. If you want, you can put some tape on the back here to keep the epoxy from getting onto the surface below. Put your bolt in. Make sure that the bottom of the bolt is flat, pointing down, just like in that photo, and let it cure for about 24 to 48 hours. I'd go a couple days. There's no reason that you can't let it cure for a couple days, but after 24 hours, it really should be usable. And then that's it. That is the finished product, and I think it looks great. It doesn't require you to go find these, which is fantastic. And now this bolt is a little bit more friendly than the other bolt was in terms of you know, the way that it slides on the discs. So yeah, that's it, guys. Hopefully this will be the last tab video. I promise. I don't see any other reason to make any other tab fix videos, but I think that this is probably the nicest outcome for these fixes, and it's worthwhile if you do this proactively and just get rid of your tabs, and as you have time, do it to all 20 of your plates. You'll never have a tab issue again, and it'll look great. So hopefully you found this video helpful, and thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.